Welcome to the Sermon Notes Podcast. I'm Jay Strother, and today we're continuing our series of conversations with our global workers serving around the world. Our goal in these episodes is to share the stories of men and women who are living out the Great Commission in unique ways, using the skills and passions God has given them to make his name known. And so today I'm joined by Britney and Micah, who've been serving in Kenya since 2020. Britney is a pediatric general and thoracic surgeon, meeting the physical and spiritual needs of children and their families while training and discipling African pediatric surgeons from, get this, 6 different countries. Micah supports her ministry by leading Bible studies for nurse anesthesia students and by serving the community on the hospital's housing committee. You'll hear how God is using their unique callings, medicine, training, discipleship, community service, all rolled into one to bring hope and healing in Jesus' name. So let's jump into the conversation. Britney and Micah, it's so good to have you back here in Middle Tennessee, but also I haven't got to spend as much time with you guys. So this is just fun for me to hear from some of our newer global workers. You guys have been doing this since 2020. And so let's talk about that a little bit, to launch into a new continent and a new ministry opportunity right in the middle of a pandemic. What was that like?
It was insane. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah.
And in 2020, so I still remember where I was. I was on call in the hospital there in Indianapolis, and one of my friends texted me and said, Kenya just closed.
No, man.
Now, this was late March 2020. We were supposed to move April 19th, and it did not happen, and no one knew. So every couple of weeks, the president of Kenya would make an update, and we would always be waiting for these live streamed YouTube updates to see, can we move this month? Can we move this month? And, our jobs ended, our lease ended. We moved in with Micah's parents in Indianapolis and just waited. Waited on the Lord and his timing, and finally moved in August of that year.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating idea, right? The Bible talks so much about waiting. And you're like, Lord, we're called and we've sold all of our stuff and, or, put it in storage, we're ready to go. And then you're in this holding pattern, but obviously actively waiting. And so you guys were sharing with me right before we came on air, almost 5 years to the date that you actually got over to Kenya and were able to establish ministry for the very first time over there with what you guys do. So let's talk about that a little bit. So just describe to our listeners what it is that you guys do.
Yeah. So I'm a pediatric surgeon. I work mostly in the chest and the belly. It took a lot of years to train to do that. And I was always interested in mission work. I'm actually the granddaughter of former home missionaries. You remember the home missionary board, right?
Yeah.
They were church planters in Oklahoma. And so missions was always in my heart. And so I've been working there at a Christian hospital that I first found out about as a resident. I got the opportunity to rotate there. And so I work at this Christian hospital where I get to live my faith openly in my work, which that, first of all, is incredible.
Yeah.
I don't have to tiptoe around. Here I'll often ask patients, would you like to have a chaplain come visit you? And if they say yes, then that's kind of my invitation
Open the door,
in to talk to them, ask to pray with them and support them on that level. But in Kenya, I get to do that with all of my patients. And, if you've ever had a sick child, you've been sick yourself, you know that there's no greater need for Jesus than in those moments. Yeah. And so in addition to working and caring for Kenyan children, I get to teach, like you mentioned, African surgeons. It's actually, I think they're from 7 different countries. I was counting in my head as I was doing that. We had a new one just start, right?
That's awesome, exciting.
And so I'm getting to train them to go back to their home countries, really as missionaries themselves, with a surgical skill that's desperately needed. And so through the years, we've gotten to disciple them. We've hosted Bible studies in our home, in addition to every time my feet enter the hospital, I'm teaching someone. And it's really incredible. We've graduated 5 surgeons since we've been there who are working in Liberia, Niger, and Kenya. And then we've got another one this year that will graduate and move back to Ethiopia. And so every year, just multiplying our efforts. I think that's biblical, right? It's making disciples.
Yes, that's right.
And it's a biblical take moving into the medical and the scientific world, but it's the same principles.
That's right.
Because alone, I am limited by my humanity and by how much I can do in a day and the sleep that I need. But
equipping others, right? As the Bible talks about so often. And we use the phrase around here, multiplication matters. And so you can multiply that impact, so all these folks that you train. So you get to do it, you get to be a practitioner, but you also get to be an equipper, which is amazing. And so, and Micah, if I remember right, your background was actually in commercial real estate.
That's correct.
And so you've had to kind of figure out how you come alongside of Britney in that ministry. Talk to us a little bit about what that looks like. What do you do?
Sure. Yeah. So before arriving in Kenya, I didn't know what my role would be. Britney was her role was very defined.
Yeah.
And that route was, we already knew what target we were going to be aiming for with that one. And I've been able to get involved in the community, serving on the housing committee primarily, and also teaching Bible studies for the anesthesia department. And within the housing committee, the main role for me has been to manage and prepare the houses for missionary families just like us that would be leaving their home country, their family, and moving all across the world to our hospital to work there. And so someone did such a really wonderful job before we ever arrived in Kenya to prepare our home and set an incredible example. And the bar was so high for me to follow in this role. And so not only selecting the house and working with the Kenyans for, within our community for where everyone will be living, but beyond that, it's grocery shopping before the family arrives.
Sure. Yeah.
Measuring windows to find out how large of curtains they might want to install in their home. All sorts of different things,
But what a blessing that is. Like you guys said, you were blessed by having a place when you arrived.
Right.
But things that you don't think about.
That's correct.
That need to be provided, and refrigerators, microwaves. I mean, those kind of things. What does that look like? But what also what a great lens into, again, people sometimes. What does a missionary do? Well, those kind of practical things, measuring for curtain rods.
That's right. Yeah.
God can use that as well.
It's a lot of the same things in the U.S., but it's harder or trickier to figure out in a different area, different context.
Yeah.
And,
well, you can't just run to Walmart or Lowe's or Home Depot. They're not just around the corner. How do you How do you provide those
finding
things?
A plumber or an electrician to outfit their house to get it ready for them to move in. Yeah. So that's been a really meaningful way for me to celebrate the family when they move. And again, someone did such an incredible job for us before we arrived. And also besides that, I've been able to work on the Bible studies within the anesthesia department. And that role, I wanted to set it up so that even when the missionaries weren't at the hospital, the Bible studies would continue.
Great.
And that was probably the number one goal that I wanted to do for that, because when we arrived during COVID, for all the reasons, the Bible studies had, they weren't happening.
Yeah.
And I thought they can't just rely on us.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
We're not here forever, right? Life carries on, and let's find a way to pass the baton well. And so over the years, I was able to work with the head teachers within the department and practice having them lead, just taking turns back and forth. This is your week, this is my week. Just simple things.
Yeah, but coaching, development.
And it was, I think it really engaged the students as well. Yeah. Because as the Bible study teacher, I'm just showing up for an hour or two each week, seeing them, but they're with one another the rest of the time. Yeah. And I think it gave them more opportunities to interact. And then beyond that, I was surprised to learn that some of the students within the program were not just Christians, but also Muslim. And working in a mission hospital, this environment, just wanted to set an example for how to welcome Muslims into Bible studies and to create an environment where Christians and Muslims can respectfully talk with one another, care about each other, and learn about who Jesus is. Yeah. And that was, these Bible studies they'll have careers long after. Yeah. And I just wanted them to learn how to interact cross-culturally with each other.
Sure.
So those are probably the most meaningful ways.
Yeah, it's tremendous.
I was able to
and there's probably a preacher joke in there somewhere about teaching people to study the Bible who usually put people to sleep. Right? There's probably some good skills there that we could all learn from what you're training these guys on. Absolutely amazing. Well, let's get into the dimensions of your calling discipling. Back to you, Britney. Tell us about what a typical week looks like for you. The balance between, again, hands-on, what you're doing in the hospital, but also equipping and training, but also discipling. We always say ministry missions. It's not a 9-to-5 job. It's a way of life.
Yes.
What does that way of life look for you?
Very much a way of life. I think something unique about me is that kind of every week is different. Depends on if I'm on call or not.
Okay.
And so for most of the past 5 years, I've taken call 1 week out of every 3. So that means from Monday to Monday, my phone is on. I'm the person that's called for any emergencies, any kids that need operations. I staff the clinic and things like that. So in those weeks, I get the most hands-on time with my residents. If we happen to have a slow day, we typically do like lunch and learns.
Yeah.
So I'll take everybody to our local coffee shop and we get together and, the topics range anywhere from, an interesting disease process we've just seen to like moral injury and how to cope with the death of our patients to how do you share the gospel with your patients in the clinic when there's 50 patients waiting outside.
Yeah.
And so we really have we get to live this awesome life where all of those can happen in the same hour.
Yeah, it's, integration is the word I would use. You really get to integrate kind of your faith and your profession.
Yeah, and I'm so cognizant that like I am the example for them. I can recall in one of my earlier years where I had a really challenging patient that I was just really discouraged by. I couldn't save her. And, I'm human, right? I'm not Jesus.
That's right.
Jesus can heal.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm fortunate that he uses my hands to bring healing. A lot, actually.
Sure.
But I'm not God.
Yeah.
And, in Deuteronomy, it says that like God controls life and death. And so I was really just kind of wrapped up in that and snapped at a couple of my residents one day, and I came home and I told Mike I was just so convicted. And now in the Kenyan culture, the attending surgeon, we call them consultants, the boss, if they snap, it's like, well, you must have done something wrong. And that's just kind of considered normal.
Yeah.
If you see your boss in the hall, you don't walk past them. The student would be expected to turn around and walk the other way.
Wow.
But we're not modeling that as Christians, right? And I told Micah that I needed to go and apologize to them.
Wow.
And I did. And I said, it's not an excuse, but I took out this frustration on you and I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't have done that. And we all want the same thing. And I really, it was very hard to do.
Yeah, sure.
But one of the residents came to me before he graduated and said, I still remember that.
Wow. Because to your point, in that culture, it's even magnified even more.
Exactly. And so it's, it's a huge responsibility to model what it means to follow the Lord and to be responsible for your actions and sometimes my bad actions and things like that. And so, but I'm a sinner too. I think a couple weeks ago you were talking about how missionaries were like the highest, right?
Sure.
And that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Growing up in the church, the Lottie Moon Christmas offering,
especially having grandparents as missionaries.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's like, I need Jesus's grace and mercy just as much as the next person.
Word.
And so in the weeks that I'm not on call, I do a lot of research. So my joke in like when I am disclaiming, who I am in the Christian world is like, I'm also an academic pediatric surgeon. And when I talk to academic groups, I'm like, I'm a Christian missionary. And it's just that I live so fully in both. So I get to do a lot of research. And then for the last year, I've actually been working outside of Kenya more to support all of the graduate surgeons of our program. So that's 13 surgeons working in 10 different countries.
Wow. So travel too.
Travel has really grown. And so that is something that has changed, but has been really exciting to continue to have relationships with the ones that I've trained and then to form new relationships with the ones that I haven't known as well, to support them personally, spiritually, clinically.
So helpful.
We're all partners in research. I was telling a group yesterday here at church that I have a friend who says, you can be a bad doctor, but don't be a bad doctor for Jesus. We need to be excellent in our work if we are doing it in Jesus' name.
Absolutely.
And to me, part of that is understanding our outcomes. And doing research is an important part of that. And so my days are all different, a mix of Zoom calls and spreadsheets and statistics and Bible studies and, it's awesome.
It very much is ministry, right?
I love
People
it.
ask what my job's like. And I was like, well, there's things you do consistently, but no 2 days are ever exactly the same because you never know what the day holds or what the need arises, those kind of things. But I want to speak to this, Brittany. I love just even in this conversation, like how calibrated your theology is, right? We need to do our best, right? In the name of Jesus. We need to give him our best, right? Colossians 3:23, whatever we do in word or deed, we do it all as we're doing it for the Lord and not for man. But at the same time to recognize, like, it's so easy, I think, when you're in a role like yours to think, right, man, it's my skill that saves people. It's my ability. And certainly, as you said, God uses us, but to recognize that God's the author of life.
Absolutely.
And to be able to keep that balance has to be incredibly important just for your own spiritual, emotional, mental health, I would think, in that profession.
Absolutely. You know, the stereotypical surgeon is one with a God complex, right? And I know where it comes from. Right? Because I get to be the person that walks out of the operating room and tells the family, like, your child is okay.
Yeah.
And I see the mothers and the fathers breathe for the first time in 2 hours or however long I've had their child.
Yeah.
And then, you know, a few of them will say to me, how can I ever repay you?
Yeah.
And I think some people could take that and their head could just swell. But for me, that person is me to God. How can I ever repay God for healing me?
Wow.
For giving me my life back? And so I just, like, I get to see that every day. And it is the most incredible gift.
Yeah, it's so good. You know, just to stay on that topic for just a second, you know, I think part of the challenge is always, you know, when people give us praise, you know, and encouragement, the temptation is that we take it ourselves. And we know mankind was not designed for glory. We need to give it to God. And you clearly do that, you know, because if not, I will argue that the praise of mankind, glory given to man, warps man.
Absolutely.
Right. And that's why we see people who are successful, people who are famous or popular or incredibly wealthy, those kind of things, they live eccentrically because they haven't learned to give that glory to God. And glory will warp a person after a while. So to be able to be humble, to be able to you know, apologize to your students, which is unheard of in that culture. I've spent a little bit of time in Kenya to know about some of those cultural differences. You know, that's a tremendous example of your faith. And I love the way that works. So good. So Micah, tell me again, you know, you were mentioning about the kind of how you're supportive and all of that, but walk us through, like, what do those days look like for you, you know? And, you know, do you guys get to check in? Hey, here's what I love about this picture, right? Is that how God puts teams together, you know, husband and wife that can complement one another so well in their giftings and in their calling. So as she's, you know, in all these different meetings, and what does a day look like for you?
Well, fortunately for us, you know, it's a 5-minute walk to the hospital from our home. And each day we get to walk to work together.
So cool.
Each day we get to have lunch together. Each day I get to walk home from the hospital with her. And those are the highlights of my day. And it's just such a special time that God has gifted us with. We moved to Kenya after being married 1 year.
Oh, wow. So I didn't realize
the
that.
past 5 years has been a whole lot of
So you've actually spent way more time together in Kenya than you did stateside.
Yeah, that's right. And so beyond that, managing our home, participating, like I said, in the Bible studies, in the different projects, such as preparing homes for families to move in. There's not a lot of structure in my role, and which is my main role, to have margin and flexibility for us in our marriage, and then also within our community. A week looks normal for us in Kenya, where someone's power goes out or someone's water goes out. And 1 week it might be our home, next week it might be our next door neighbor, the next week might be the person next to them. So each week you're just really interconnected with helping each other, you know, accomplish.
Yeah, about how many houses, or, you know, do you help oversee with the housing
There's
committee?
150 total units.
Okay, that's a lot
on the site. But everyone that lives there works at the hospital. So your neighbors are your coworkers. They're missionaries, they're Kenyans, they're from other countries. And so it's been quite a mix, and we all know each other. We all see each other each day.
Community, I love it.
And there's, that's been a big growth for us, is learning a different value of being in such tangible community with your next door neighbor.
Yeah. I think, you know, it's interesting, you know, that this in the United States, there's kind of been this move back towards walkable community living, you know, where I think some people realized we got a little bit away from that and are jumping our cars, go everywhere, live this hectic, fast-paced life. And so clearly your lives are very full, you know, but at the same time, they're very knitted within that community that you guys are a part of. And so I love that, again, that word integration. just keeps coming to mind how, it really is life on life disciple making. And that's a beautiful thing to see. Talk to us a little bit about Kenya. What are some of the unique cross-cultural challenges that you guys have faced, and maybe some of the gifts as well? That's one thing I've always recognized. Again, you get, sometimes we assume these places, it's like, oh, they need our help. There are things that we need to come alongside of them. But I have also, every place I've ever been, man, I've learned so much from the culture. So give us kind of both sides of that. Maybe what are some of the challenges and what are some of the gifts?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I think we take much more than we give. And, one of my favorite things and the unexpected blessings has been how much Micah gets to participate in my work. Yeah. So he didn't even mention all of the times he's come in and had his pelvis wrapped in a trauma training or, been a model for ultrasound teaching or anything like that. Everyone at the hospital knows him. When he brings in a heater, because I'm operating on a tiny baby, the staff in the operating room just bring it in. They're like, oh, your husband came by, here's this. And,
how cool.
So that's really, just being able to spend so much time together has been such a gift. And the Kenyan culture is so much slower, intentionally so, right? It's about relationship. And so, time is kind of this ambiguous thing where the most important thing is not your schedule, but it's the person that you're with.
Yeah.
And so if that interaction takes longer and you are late, quote unquote, because they wouldn't even really use that word for the next thing, then the next person will assume that you are doing something very important and give you that grace and patience.
Wow.
And when you show up, like, is everything okay? Yeah, let's start with our day, And so it's just, it has been an adjustment for us. And like in the medical world, we still do have to keep some schedules, but I think we do a good job. It's kind of this hybrid culture of, keeping time, but also making sure there's space enough for us. I don't know. There's some other interesting things like rain is always a blessing.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, it's raining on your graduation day. And it's like, oh, this is a blessing. This means I'm going to be blessed, right?
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about New Year's?
Sure.
That's a really good one.
Yeah. So one thing that we learned about a common celebration in Kenya is New Year's Eve. We celebrate that here in the U.S.
Sure.
But their New Year's Eve looks much more similar to like our Thanksgiving.
Okay.
It's celebrated as a day of thanks to God. It's thanks for a year of being alive. It's a year. It's a moment of like remembrance of all family members and friends who maybe have passed over the previous year, and it's common to stay up through midnight praying, and it's like a prayer vigil type of event. That's the best way I can kind of describe it. We felt honored when we had a family invite us to their home for New Year's and celebrate with them. But it's just a different glimpse. We do some of the same things here in the U.S. But it's just a different. There's a difference to it. And that was really
so
special.
Incredible. They're I know some of the churches where I grew up in Illinois, they used to have these services where they call them I forget they call them watch services where they would ring in the new year. By praying. Very few of those happen anymore. But again, the integration of kind of a Thanksgiving moment with a celebration of New Year, but with praying, thanking God, but also praying for the year ahead. I love that. It's part of the fun of being in a different culture is you get to adopt and learn some of those different traditions. So that's great. I was thinking about when you were talking about time, and you guys probably already know this, but the New Testament has two words for time. One's chronos, which is where we get the word chronology and chronicle, and that's the time of the clock. But more often, the New Testament uses the word kairos, which means a unique moment in time. If chronology asks what time is it, Kairos asks, what's this time for? And so I love that that's embedded into the Kenyan culture, more of this understanding of, hey, this is the moment I'm in with this person, and there's just an expectation. There's the culture respects that. That's probably something that we could really learn a lot from. Because I think the tyranny of the urgent in our culture, keeps us sometimes from depth in relationships, from gospel conversation opportunities, because we're rushing to the next thing so often. So what a beautiful, beautiful expression of that in the culture that God's placed you guys in. So anyway, man, love this conversation. What are some specific areas of need or ways that we can continue to pray for you guys and the ministry that's there? This, by the way, the size of this one, I think when people think Kenyan hospital, they think probably small, tiny. This is a pretty significant operation. About how many beds beds?
Yeah, so there's 360 beds.
That is huge.
It is actually. So that's adult and pediatrics.
Yeah.
The children's hospital part of it is about 90 beds.
Okay.
We have a pediatric ICU, a neonatal ICU, an adult ICU. We have a bunch of surgical specialists, and our hospital is actually known for surgical training. And so medical and pediatrics training will start in the coming years, but we have been known for surgical training for 15, 20 years now.
I know our folks who've been there have been just so impressed with the operation and what God's doing there and all this kind of thing. So how do we continue to pray for you guys?
Yeah. I mean, I think we're in kind of a transition time for our ministry, moving from being just full-time in Kenya to now part-time in Kenya and part-time outside of Kenya. Yeah. And I would say a big prayer request for us is to find a balance in those things. And also, and I think we've been talking about this, in the sermons and certainly in Sunday school yesterday, it's like, what is our work to do? Mm-hmm. Because the need is all around us. Yeah. And the need is all around us in Middle Tennessee, the same as it's all around us in Kenya.
Yeah.
And so it's like, the verse from church yesterday, here I am, send me. Mm-hmm. Just being in Kenya, yes, it means I'm sent, and I could fall back on that.
Sure.
But what is the work God has for me today?
Yeah, that's good.
And especially as I've been taking on some more responsibilities, we've been traveling more. It's like, how does God want me to balance all these things?
That's right.
What is His work for me? Mm-hmm. And so I think just prayer in that transition, that we would be good stewards of this new work. Yeah, and I know the transition's been a little, just different for Micah too.
Yeah, it's it's a new focus where we've learned over the few years that traveling is a little more involved. There's a few surprise details, like a random security fee or traveling at nighttime. Just a lot of logistics that can be overwhelming to organize. And so I'll be stepping back from some of my roles in the hospital.
Because you get to play travel agent as well.
I get to do travel agent.
It's not a fun job. I don't think it is.
It's stressful figuring out all the eSIM cards and all the things as you move around. But that's definitely a focus for us too. Yeah. But it's exciting. Mm-hmm. We talk about discipleship as training people and sending them out and celebrating them, and that is what we are witnessing that moment with the ministry, with her training program, where each year one or two students graduate and they move back to their home African country, and we are now in a role to support them and to help them succeed where they are, and that's really exciting for us.
Yeah, and I think, the other prayer request would be for these people. So, we have 9 doctors who are training to be pediatric surgeons in Kajabe. I now help support 2 doctors training in Uganda. And then we have 13 surgeons actively working across the continent. Now, all of them are believers, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Some of them are the only surgeon in their entire country.
Wow.
Their entire country, and they love Jesus, right? And so how can I support them to be healthy, to have things that would make their jobs easier? Because when their job's easier, they have more time for ministry. Yeah. They have more time for evangelism. Yeah. I joke that our surgeon in Madagascar, man, he must be a preacher first, because his numbers are a little lower, maybe. Yeah. He doesn't do quite as many cases a year. And I think it's because he's too busy sharing Jesus.
Sharing the gospel.
And it's like, that's not a problem. Yeah. I don't have a problem there, right? And so it's just for the 13 plus 11, so that's 24 pediatric surgeons and surgeons to be. And maybe just to frame the problem a little bit, in Tennessee, there's somewhere around 45 pediatric surgeons. Okay. This is actually one of the higher density states, similar to probably California or New York, I would imagine. Wow. So it's a surgeon density for pediatric surgeons of about 1 to 33,000 kids.
Okay.
In Kenya, there's one surgeon for about 500,000 kids.
Wow.
In the country of Burundi, which is one of the countries I support, there's one surgeon for 3 million kids.
Oh my goodness.
So we're talking about 100-fold, right?
Yeah.
And so the jobs that these surgeons have, it's just a privilege to help strengthen them, to support them, to be the person they can call. I got a message yesterday, I'm in desperate need of this. And so I'm like, okay, how am I going to find this supply for this person? And so just praying for them as they do the Lord's work.
Yeah. And what an opportunity, right? You train 2 in Burundi. Well, now that you've halved that, but just the tremendous opportunity that God's afforded you guys. And, but I also know that, the burden of that and the weight of that you carry has to be significant. So I love James 1, which says, if we need wisdom, right, we can ask for it. And so we will certainly pray for wisdom on how to balance, your hands-on responsibilities with equipping and discipling, because you guys manage a lot. Are there a story or two? Is there a story maybe that sticks out in your mind of just a particular way you've seen God move that you'd love to point us to?
Well,
can you pick a favorite?
I mean,
I know it's hard. You probably have lots.
I have lots, and I'd love to tell a story about a patient, but I think maybe my favorite story is that we were out of these special IVs for babies. So for the healthcare workers who might be listening, it's like central lines. It's longer than an IV, and it goes in and kind of sits here near the heart, and you can give special medications. And we actually resuscitate babies from 26 weeks gestation, which is unheard of. It's usually 28 or 29 weeks in the country. So we're saving these tiny babies, these gifts of life, but they oftentimes need IV access. And we were completely out. And this has kind of been an area of my research and focus, helping to decrease the infections associated with them. I was keeping our inventory. And so one day I just all of a sudden, I don't know what happened, but we were out. I thought we had more and we didn't. And so I sent an email to our pediatricians and the pediatric surgeons. And I said, hey, if anyone has, this was on a Friday, if anyone has any connections, we're out. And there's going to be a kid that we can't save because we don't have any more of these lines. Oh my. And on Monday morning, I was walking through the hospital and I hear this, are you Dr. Britney? And I was like, yeah. And it was, someone who with an American accent. And she said, oh, someone told me to give you these. And I opened it up and it was 4 of those special. And I said, when did you leave the U.S.? And she was like, oh, I got to our town on Saturday. I left Thursday night. And so before I had even sent up the bat signal, they were already on the way here.
Oh,
and we have just seen that over and over again. The beautiful part of being a missionary is getting to rely on God. Yeah. It's the privilege of relying on God. Micah has taught me that like when we're in heaven, we don't, we don't need to rely on God. Things won't be hard. We don't get to like have that dependence. Maybe it'll be in a different way. Yeah. Let me not say it's not, but in a different way. And being able to like be on the receiving end of the generosity from Brentwood Baptist, from all of our supporters, from this random person who I didn't even know, who was meeting the need and answering a prayer even before I recognized that there was a problem.
So amazing.
It's incredible.
Yeah, it's a reminder
if I
of
could
God's
bottle
sovereignty.
up that feeling, I would share it with everybody,
Yeah.
And so I think
to know that God was already moving to answer a prayer request that you didn't yet know you had. Yeah. Man, what a testimony to his hand at work. That's so good. How about for you, Micah? Has there been a particular story or a moment that
I think really I get excited about the trainees. Yeah. And so I think of a person. So the first year that we were there, he graduated, and Britney worked. His name is Eves, and he has a wife and 2 kids. And when how many languages? I get very confused by this.
English was Eve's 5th language.
Wow.
And most of his training was in French, his medical school.
Yeah. And when he graduated, he moved to Niger, which is this country where there is one hospital that is a Christian hospital and everyone else in the country is not a Christian. Yeah. And we can't move to Niger today to work there and to thrive in the way that he can. And he is thriving in the hospital. It's a pediatric surgeon, but his wife has this burden for Muslim ministry. And these people, they're not American missionaries. Yeah. They're from Africa. Yeah. And so to get to witness, people like Eves, who, we get to play one role to train them in a skill, but to watch his wife flourish is so exciting just for us.
Yeah. Such a great story. Again, God put that in them clearly, but you guys got to add that equipping component that they needed. And so again, that getting to be a co-laborer in the gospel, getting to watch God do these things that he was already moving to accomplish, but that you guys get to be a part of that story. Yeah. Man, that's thrilling. And again, such massive impact where there's such a huge need. So good, you guys. Oh man, I'd love to talk to you all day, but I'm excited that you're here with us. Looking forward to our time together later this week. We want to continue to pray for you guys on this journey. Maybe give us one word, verse, something. What's God teaching you right now?
Oh gosh, there's so many things. 1 John 3:16 has been like high in our heads these last few months. This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we should lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. And just as we move into this next phase of our ministry, that has just been our prayer. It's like, how are we called to lay down our lives? And I think that really has been just ever present in our minds, trying to think about what this next phase looks like. And so that would be how to pray for us is, each day to know how to do that. And I think also in mission work, in ministry, in life, it's hard to know also when to stop.
Yeah.
And how to care for yourself.
Yep. That's right.
And so that's definitely also reminds us.
Yeah. What Sabbath look like, when you're these continual daily needs that are so urgent, especially from a medical standpoint. Yeah. How are you guys restored and renewed? And again, I hope that this time back here is going to be able to provide some of that for you guys.
Absolutely.
As you get ready for that next chapter. So good. Well, you guys are amazing. So it's so fun to hear. Thank you for sharing that with our church, and thank you for being here, and just thank you for what you do for the kingdom and for God's glory. So it's so good. Well, thank you guys for joining us for this episode of the Sermon Notes podcast. Britney and Micah's story reminds us that God can use every skill, career, and life stage for his glory, whether it's in an operating room, a classroom, or a committee meeting. Let's be praying for them, the trainees that they are discipling, and for the children and families that they serve in Kenya and beyond. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future conversations with our global workers, and we will see you next time on the Sermon Notes podcast.